Welcome to a special SACPA session entitled Our Recent Cuts to Alberta Post-Secondary Education Justifiable. It's great to see a good turnout here. I've got a few introductory remarks, but I'll keep those quite brief, and then we'll turn it over to the folks who are going to have something more substantive to say. First, I'll ask just standard cell phone protocol. Please be thoughtful with respect to those. My name is Jason Larondo. I'll be moderating tonight, but I'll take mostly a back seat. The session today is being recorded as is standard for SACPA sessions. SACPA is a volunteer nonprofit organization that relies on the contributions of members and session attendees to continue its work. You'll know this if you're a regular at SACPA sessions, and if you're not, you're invited to make a small donation if you like. There's a garbage can, of all things, in the corner there. Don't read anything into that. I have no idea what that is. We should acknowledge at least a couple of partners for tonight. U of L has an ongoing partnership with SACPA. Of course, the library and the Lethbridge Herald. We've got several speakers this evening, and I'll introduce them in turn. The idea for format tonight is to give them each about 8 minutes to speak, leaving us plenty of time for questions afterwards. I want to say just a couple of brief things about context. It's important to acknowledge that this session came together a little bit in some degree, at least, of haste, in light of the timing of events and whatnot. To that end, I think it's really important to emphasize that this is just one of the conversations that could, and we hope will, be taking place. It's obvious for anybody who's read the lineup and the bios that this really is a University of Lethbridge-centered panel, and there were all kinds of discussions about what we could do to include other voices that really do need to be heard. But at the end of the day, this had to come together, as I say, on pretty short notice. But this is not to suggest that the voices of the college, for example, of City Council, aren't tremendously important in this conversation. So we hope that this is just one of many such venues. One practical note, it seems that there are two different versions of a petition flying around. There's one that has 2 columns, and there's one that has 3. My understanding is that the one that has 3 columns is the important one. That's the one that's legal, because it includes all of the information that needs to be included for the petition to actually bear some weight. So please keep an eye out for the one that has 3 columns. I want to turn the floor over to Jessica Parkin from the library for just a moment before we turn our attention to our speakers.
So just good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Lethbridge Public Library. We're very pleased to partner with SACPA in bringing this discussion to a very large part of our community who would be affected by these cuts and how it changes the university. And so I've said my piece, and now we'll get down to the interesting parts. Thanks.
Okay, we've rejigged the order that you saw on the poster just a little bit to accommodate a couple of particular needs. We'll start with Rob Sutherland, who, among other things, is the president of the Confederation of Alberta Faculty Association.
So there's the question that we've posed for the evening, and I'd like to start with that quote: "You never let a serious crisis go to waste." And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do the things you could not do before. And so first off, I want to thank everyone for showing up, particularly those of you from the larger community. And often, professors at the university seem to be know-it-alls and are entitled, and they're constantly complaining about their budgets and so forth. And I'd like to say that I know very clearly, as does my faculty association, who it is that we're responsible to. And we're responsible to the people in our larger community, to the people of Alberta, and to the people in Canada more generally. I know that very clearly, and so do my colleagues. So I'd like to start there. The fact of the matter is, we are not a handmaiden to any particular government. So why does this topic matter now? And I think we're actually at a very memorable moment, certainly one that I'll remember. This is by far the largest downsizing of the universities that we have seen in our generation. This will be an important loss of opportunity for our students at all levels, from college students through to PhD students and postdoctoral trainees at our universities. This will represent a clear and significant reduction in quality of education that's provided. There will be fewer programs available for people to choose from in the province of Alberta, and there will be a big impact, not immediately, but going forward in the future on our health and our long-term economic prosperity. So why does it matter if the universities get cut? And universities contribute to the larger community in a lot of different ways that have not fully come out in the newspaper, and certainly not in the talks given by the Minister of Advanced Education, the most recent Minister of Advanced Education. We are one of the most important drivers of prosperity in any society, the universities. We produce an educated cohort of citizens. These people pay higher taxes. They use fewer social programs through their lifetimes. They have lower unemployment. They're healthier after a university education. They have a flexible background in respect to changing employment futures that is extremely important going forward. We create future technologies by making discoveries now that end up enabling future technological advances. Our students that complete end up being the earlier adopters of technologies. They can identify and understand the value of new technologies and bring it into their workplaces and into their homes. So universities have a commitment to the long term. It's to the health and prosperity of our funders, and those are the taxpayers of Alberta and Canada, not the Redford government. Another important place that this matters, I found this article by the Senior Deputy Governor of the Bank of Canada, who a couple of months ago made a speech at Queen's University and popped it up online, identifying where Canada falls short in terms of its participation in the world economy. And he notes two things we fall short on, and I'll only highlight one. We lead all of the comparable economies in terms of the number of people who have college certificates and technical training. There's no other country that has the technical training that Canada produces from our college and technical schools. We are middling in terms of university degrees. Where we fall short relative to our comparators is in advanced degrees. PhDs, we're in the bottom third of the countries that have industrial economies. That's very important for the future of Canada. It is the educational attainment of managers and people who play significant roles in the economy that determine the ability to direct in a flexible way companies through a changing economy. And we have about half the number of managers with reasonable advanced degrees that we see in American companies as a comparator. There's also an improvement in the quality of management and the adoption of technologies that well-trained managers with advanced degrees have. This is where we're going to see the high-growth innovative activity, is from people who have advanced degrees from our universities. The context now is that no other large aspect of the budget in Alberta took a cut like we did. So Alberta Health Services had a plus 3%. There were a number of other adjustments in that ministry. For example, the major health funding agency for research was absorbed by health services under changes with the budget. They also absorbed one of my favorite funding envelopes, the Alberta Heritage Foundation for Medical Research, created by Peter Lougheed. It's now moribund and it's just money sitting in health services. The big Ministry of Education experienced essentially a zero. Our ministry, Advanced Education, received minus 7%. And in the context of expecting, in writing from Redford, that we would have a plus 2, given inflation, this is a huge, huge deficit that the universities are facing. The economy of Alberta ranks number 1 in Canada. In terms of population growth, we're growing very, very fast. Our unemployment rate is the lowest in Canada. Our retail sales growth was huge. Our real GDP doing fantastic. Our employment growth is the envy of other provinces. our per capita spending. We often hear from the Conservatives how much we're spending per capita. It's right in the middle of the pack. We're number 5 in terms of per capita spending. In terms of revenue per capita, we're right in the middle of the pack. We're not extreme, spending a lot more than anyone else. And this particular figure is extremely telling. Public spending by the provincial government, we're the lowest as the percent of the wealth created in our province. We're absolutely at the bottom of the pack. Okay. Nonetheless, we seem to have an economic crisis to justify a -7%. Other contexts, the minister, Lukaszuk, has attempted to explain the deep funding cuts because he said that was necessary to ensure the cooperation of the universities and other parts of the post-secondary sphere. He needed to build a new campus Alberta, and he considered -7% to be an enabler of that to take place. That is a big giant stick to hit the universities to make them fall into line with this particular program. He also says that the university has to more closely align with the government's agenda and that his recipe for change is absolutely non-negotiable. It sort of flies in the face of what he's been saying, that these letters of expectation are negotiable. He says it's non-negotiable in print. He also says that he's doing this for the students. He's got the students with him, that somehow this is all for the good of the students. And I bring your attention to the last paragraph of a letter signed today by myself, representing the Confederation of Alberta Faculty Associations, and the chair of the Confederation of Alberta University Students, Raphael Jacob. It clearly says that they reject the deep funding cuts. They're not in favor of what the minister has provided in this, and they call into question the whole vision of this particular government for universities. Other reasons that have been presented for having such deep funding cuts, Lukaszuk says that we need to change the rules of intellectual property ownership. That is, we need to change who owns the inventions and the copyright created at universities. These need to be shared with private partners, and the current legislation prevents that. The fact of the matter is, at all the universities, the legislation covering intellectual property enables the transfer of intellectual property to the private sector. It is explicitly defined how that process will occur. There's no wall between the university and the private sector in terms of transfer of intellectual property. Lukaszuk says another justification is we can save millions by enabling transfer of courses across universities. He says someone taking Psychology 101 at the University of Lethbridge can't transfer credit to the University of Calgary for Psychology 101. Simply false. He says that students moving from one university to another have to redo their entire year of course credit. Simply false. We have a provincial course transfer system that's the envy of other provinces. British Columbia and Ontario, they come and look at our system and are jealous of the course transfer system we have. We already have this, and we've had it for years. Lukaszuk is actually wrong. Lukaszuk also said that he doesn't want to have all these mediocre programs around. And the only example he's presented so far is 5 mediocre engineering schools. And what he wants is 2 really good ones. Well, the fact is we have only 2 really good ones. We've already done this. Redford says, do we really need to have political science faculty at every university? And implies, that they're all mediocre. Well, the fact is that at some of the universities, there's outstanding political science departments, and yes, we do need political science at every university. There's a level of misinformation here that is very difficult to reconcile with the facts on the ground. I don't think there have been any legitimate reasons offered by this government for why they gave -7%, except one. And that is what Lukaszuk said, in order to coerce compliance with the letters of expectation. That's the only justification that holds any water. The letters of expectation, unprecedented in Alberta history. There have never been such things. These are not mandate letters or mandate and roles documents that are traditional in Alberta. This is something created by Lukashuk or by the cabinet. And they contain, I'm sure my colleague Chris Nichol will say more about this, but it contains essentially more centralized government control over academic programming, and including coordination with employers, having to check to make sure your academic programming is wanted by employers, and more alignment with applied research, less attachment to fundamental research going on in the universities. The cost of this will be academic integrity of our universities, the freedom of our universities and faculty will be diminished, and there'll be a system directed by short-term economic and political interests. That's what we lose in favor of this short-term direction. The long-term benefit from fundamental research will be lost, and there are many, many examples of where fundamental research pays off. I'll mention one. Brian Kolb, who's sitting over there, and I had a student, an undergraduate student at the University of Lethbridge named Brent Reynolds, who worked with us on absolutely fundamental NSERC, natural science-based research. He learned a lot of techniques and methodology while he was in our laboratories, completing his undergraduate degree, something that the current system would really not promote at all. And he ended up going and doing a PhD, and in the course of doing that, discovered brain stem cells. Brain stem cells afford an opportunity to modify the brain after damage or disease. And 3 spin-off companies have been created by that discovery, by somebody doing useless curiosity-based research at the University of Lethbridge in Calgary. There will be fewer of the benefits I described from high-quality, accessible higher education available to young people in Alberta. So, the question is, are recent cuts to Alberta post-secondary education justifiable? I don't think so. The problem we have, however, is many people believe something along this line. This is a comment I cut out of the Edmonton Journal. There are people, and many of them, who think that the system is so deeply flawed that we're not orienting ourselves towards the real goals of a university system, that we do need to be disrupted in this dramatic way. And it's based on misinformation, such as you can't get credit for 1 year at one university when you move to another university. Simply misinformation. Thank you.